All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. Happy January 2025. Welcome to this evening's January's Executive Committee. I am Jessica Chait, and I'm pleased to call this meeting to order. As everyone knows, we have a hybrid meeting policy that can be found on our website. Board members are expected to attend meetings in person unless they have a disability or an extraordinary circumstance. Excused members and members of the public will still be able to participate virtually. Members who are joining via Zoom must leave their cameras on, and this meeting is being streamed live on our YouTube channel, and a transcript is being recorded. Interesting, before we get to our presentation for this evening, our first discussion, we're actually going to be talking about the open meetings law, which is connected to that preamble that we say in all of our meetings. Before we get to that, though, just really brief housekeeping. I know a number of people have, frankly, health, family, other issues this evening, so we are a smaller group. Thankfully, we do have quorum, so thank you all for coming out and being here to joining us on time. And I do want to note that I don't typically like to call out people, but Leslie, in this case, is repping us at the Hudson River Park Advisory Trust, which we are CB4 is the first vice chair of the advisory, and unfortunately there was a conflict in this evening's meeting, and so their meeting is meeting at the same time as our exec, and so though I represent us, she is our second there, and so she will be first there tonight while I am here this evening. So, but she did miss last month's meeting, so she wanted to be sure that you all didn't forget her. Unfortunately, Marty also had a conflict this evening, so we'll all have to do our part in making sure that should we discuss anything relevant to connected to WPE, that we not miss out from your voice at the table. So to just dive into the agenda, as mentioned, and I think there are a few copies. Are there copies?
Oh, they're in the Dropbox, then I printed out to you.
Okay, so we are joined by Evan?
Yep.
Great. We are joined by Evan Lieberman. This came up briefly last year, and I'm going to turn it to him to introduce this proposal to address open meetings, but wanted to bring it up for two reasons. One, because there's proposed legislation, so we should know about it and know how their office also hopefully will take our feedback as they're thinking about how to promote any legislation. But additionally, this topic of open meetings also came up at Borough Board. And for those who don't know, Borough Board is a once a month meeting convened by the borough president, and it represents all of the board chairs of Manhattan. We gather once a month. We talk about issues that our communities are dealing with. Sometimes there are presentations based on feedback we've given in the past. And interestingly, at the January meeting just 10 days ago, the issue of quorum and attendance came up with, as you can imagine, every board, frankly, being, total snowflakes and having different issues. But hearing from several boards, some issues about getting and maintaining a quorum at their committee level, in person being really a challenge for new members was brought up, for older members, and that managing technology was also kind of a thread and a theme throughout. And I would just also note that some boards take different, they have every meeting in the same place. So some boards don't have that issue. They've solved it once and they've solved it for all of their committees because they use that space on a recurring basis. We know we are all over the district and borrowing and using spaces. And we've all experienced, difficult technology issues. I think as a whole, we've done Jesse in particular has done a really good job in managing that for us. So thank you, Jesse. But, I just think after we hear a little bit about the legislation, it will be good for us also to talk about hear from Jesse and talk about any other issues or things that we see as a theme that we might want to elevate both for our board or other boards. We agreed at Borough Board to bring this back for discussion in February. And to see if there's if there's some theme among all of the boards, we could consider writing a letter representing all of our concerns and try to advocate to, for example, the city for, more funding or more something to help address that issue. So with that, it's a bit of a long preamble. Evan, I apologize. I'm sure you have a very focused way of addressing this legislation in the way that the senator is thinking about open meetings. So we'll turn it to you, and you can walk us through that.
Sure, yeah, thank you. So I'm Evan. I am Assistant Legislative Director for Senator Hoylman-Sigal. Good to be here. I'll be super brief because I think you all are pretty familiar, obviously, with how the open meetings law affects the way you all function. So, obviously in 2022, oh, Brad is here. Brad, would you like to take it away?
No, because you were doing such a great job. Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, so as you guys know, in 2022, the open meetings law was amended to take into account that a lot of boards required some form of teleconferencing because of COVID pandemic. And the last year's budget extended these changes to 2026. And, as you recited in the beginning of this meeting, video conferencing is limited to circumstances in which members have special circumstances. So, the requirement still exists that members attend in person. We heard a lot of feedback from boards, particularly from CB7, saying that, while they really strive to have their members attend in person, they found it difficult to get the 50% in-person quorum for committee meetings and for full board meetings. So, this legislation is really basic. It acknowledges, that board members should continue to be required to attend in person unless they have some sort of special circumstance, which boards can continue to determine in line with the law. And it also acknowledges that there should be some sort of in-person quorum requirement. And really all this legislation does is it amends, subdivision, it simply amends the section 103A of the Public Officers Law to say that, in the case of advisory bodies like community boards, that in-person quorum requirement would be 1/4 as opposed to the existing, minimum majority of the members. So, we think that allowing 1/4 quorum would allow greater flexibility for community boards to function. So we got last year it passed the New York State Senate, and we got a letter in support from the Manhattan Borough President's Office. CB7 voted as a full board to sign on to that letter. And, it would be great going into this session, given that, we're hoping to push this bill as well, to get feedback from CB4 and learn, what changes we could make, and if you all have any thoughts on whether this would be a benefit or perhaps a burden to your board.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Senator.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Evan. And thank you. Really, I don't have much to add except that, we have heard from some community boards where there might be people with professional obligations or young children, or both, including other extenuating circumstances that COVID and the online option of Zoom has brought forth a new opportunity that we should acknowledge and try to build on. That said, we also got feedback from different parts of the state where they were worried about quorum requirements allowing maybe less involved and interested participants, the potential of upending their meetings or creating dissension, I guess, if you will, in circumstances that might not happen if the meeting were entirely in person. But we're really appreciate the opportunity to hear from you today and to get feedback. We passed the bill, as Evan said, last session in the Senate. It didn't move in the Assembly, but Assemblymember Alex Boris carries it. And certainly there's a chance to see if we could move it in both houses this year. A bill that is supported, though, by our community boards. It wouldn't be very productive if we passed a bill that my own community board didn't want. So that's one of the reasons why we really appreciate this opportunity to hear you out tonight.
Great, thank you. Just one clarifying question. Would it be accurate to say that if this were to pass, is there an opportunity for individual boards to adopt a policy greater than 25% if they felt
Yes.
like it did not meet their, meaning it doesn't become the requirement, it becomes a minimum.
Yeah,
For
we were
boards.
speaking tonight. We were actually speaking about, making that explicitly clear in the legislation, right, Evan?
I mean, I think that's the intent, and I think we think that it does do that currently, but, obviously want to make sure that that's explicit, because it seems like that is a concern for you all.
Great, I think Jesse is from your.
Yeah, that was one question I had. But the other question, Bratton, is that right now it seems that this is, ever since it was amended, that this, it gets extended for a period of time. Do you think we're at a point where we collectively, the state is saying, okay, this is just what the new reality is and this is what the law is? Or do you think we're gonna have to be talking about this every 2 years for a long time? And again, I just ask your opinion,
Yeah.
not necessarily for.
Well, I think, Evan, did our bill that we passed have a sunset?
So it has the same sunset, or would have the same sunset as the entire Section 103A of the Public Officers Law, which currently is 2026.
So I guess it regularly sunsets. I don't know why that's the case, to be honest, but I hear you on like having to renew this, and it doesn't really lead to consistent, board policies or practices. So that's a good flag.
Yeah, well, it's just a question. I mean, I think we're solid. I think at least our board is pretty solid. We have a hybrid policy. We adopted it and that's what we're gonna follow, and for now at least. And I do think though it does allude to the question about funding, right? Which is that if we're all gonna advocate for funding, boards are gonna advocate for funding for, more money for technology or vendors or whatever to a piece of legislation that could change in 2 years. I think that could create a little bit of a stagnation in that. And so that was my only point on that. It sounds like there's a lot of support for keeping the amendment on some level, whether it be 50% or 25%. But the idea that there's a teleconference portion to the open meetings law sounds like there's overall support statewide.
Great, we're gonna turn it, yeah, JD.
Yeah, just clarification. So, Jesse, I guess you can answer this. We still required to have a quorum of the members before we can meet, whether they're here or virtual. Is that correct?
Well, so currently, yes, I think and Evan, you can, again, you did such a good job of explaining it, you can tell me if I'm wrong, what the proposed legislation would allow that quorum in certain cases to be reduced from 50, it's 50% plus one, it's 51%.
In person.
In person, this would reduce it down to 25, is that accurate, Evan?
Around 12, I think. In
So
person.
the law currently says that the body's general quorum has to can only be counted with respect to in-person members. So this would say that only 25% of members had to be present in person, but the general quorum requirements would apply. So you'd have to add up whoever is present online to that 25% that's present in person
So
to equal
real world example, right now, there's 19 members of this committee, right? So we need 50% plus, we need 50% plus one people to be in person to have quorum. That would only require, the legislation would allow it to be 25%. So instead of 9 people, it would be, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6. So to conduct a meeting, to hold a meeting, people could still be virtual and everything, but
But we still need the quorum number.
Yeah, and then
yes.
you still need 5 online. If you had 4 in person, would be 25%, you would still need 5 online
Right.
to make for the total of 9
Right.
to make.
That doesn't change.
Oh,
no.
so there, no,
No, in person, quorum is only counted by in person.
No,
that's not what he
That's not what I'm saying.
Sorry.
so tell
Sorry,
us
Evan.
again.
I apologize.
That's why we're.
Let's just use a real example of them if we can, like this body of 19, you can walk us through it. With 19,
If you have a full board meeting, let's say you need 26 people.
Yes,
that's quorum.
That's quorum. With this legislation, you still need 26 people, but you only need 12 to be in person.
Evan, can you answer
And the
that?
other
That's
12 have
right.
to be-
That's right. So the quorum requirement is still the same for the meeting. You would
Right.
really just be able to count some remote members towards that quorum, which currently you're not able to do because there has to be a 50+1, if I understand correctly, for community boards present in person.
So the 50% remains, but only the minimum of 25% in person must be,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
So now,
right.
so can I just, one more clarification to build on that? Right now, our members who are excused count, I believe, towards quorum. They do not.
No, they don't.
But can people participate if they don't have an excused absence? Like, I just don't wanna, like, I have a conflict that I've decided makes it impossible for me to come? Like, does it put the burden,
It does.
does
So the
that
question,
allow?
so the question is what, if I understand, the question is that for those people which are online, is there additional requirements so that they
Well,
count
yeah.
for the quorum?
There isn't currently envisioned in the bill. We've spoken to some other community board members and leadership in different parts of the city about perhaps allowing community boards to set their own standards in that regard. Isn't that right, Evan?
Yeah, we've heard that. That's true.
So this is the burden on Jesse now we have to have an excuse. We still have to have.
Or something
Yeah, I'm
else?
sorry, I missed that piece of it, so the quorum would be 25% in person.
Right.
You would still need the other 25% to be there online.
And we don't know, and it would be up to us to define any specific requirement we want for those people.
Because the legislation does not have a requirement. You
Right.
could, that's right. You could be in Cancun and on Zoom and say, I'm
Which
here.
I'm so sorry. I do want to correct that this legislation keeps the language that requires members to be present, barring any extraordinary circumstances. So it does not change that. You do still need to have a reason to be absent. However, let's say a large percentage of the members are either sick or have childcare responsibilities or have some other obligation that you all recognize as an extraordinary circumstance. You would still be able to carry on the meeting with 25% of people present in person.
Okay, and then, okay, got it, okay.
As long as that other 25%+1 were online.
Yeah.
And that 25% online couldn't just say I'm on vacation. They would still have to meet the extraordinary circumstances standard that you all interpret.
Yeah, okay.
And they have to keep their cameras on, right?
So
Why is
That's a
it-
requirement, in terms of
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think,
yeah.
Evan, in terms of specific requirements, like keeping your camera on, et cetera, we could, our bill doesn't define that, but that wouldn't stop a community board from doing so, right?
No,
Well, how
and
come the
that's
bill
already the
can't-
requirement of the open meeting law.
Yeah. We like that requirement, we like it.
Wait, can I have a question, Brad or Evan, is just, why couldn't the bill include that?
It could, it doesn't. And that's one of the bill, we're open to amending the bill based on your suggestions for sure. Yeah, so it doesn't at the moment, but that doesn't mean we couldn't
Okay.
include that if that's what you're looking for.
But Evan,
Thank
just to clarify, Evan, the current amendment does, right? It's already in there that the camera has to be on. That was my understanding.
So yeah, the current requirement of the open meeting law is that cameras have to be on. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a legal expert in community boards, but this bill just really does not address whether or not someone's camera needs to be on. It only changes language with respect to in-person.
Changing the quorum.
Yeah.
Okay, Katie?
But we could in theory change that, but that's not currently in the bill.
Yeah.
Katie, go ahead.
Thanks. I guess I'm wondering, and here I am away, but
I hope
It's-
you have an extraordinary circumstance.
Yeah, exactly.
I do not. But so I guess I have a question. Like Community Board 7 has said that they have a hard time getting people in person. And so I'm just wondering if we don't change the definition of extraordinary circumstance, I wonder if it actually helps anybody. If it helps any community board meet their quorum. But am I correct that you're saying that the definition of extraordinary circumstance would be left to each community board? Is that right? Or is it defined in a law somewhere?
So the law doesn't, it does define it, but it does let the community board have some say over it. So it gives some examples such as disability, illness, caregiving responsibility, or any other significant or unexpected factor or event. But again, some community boards are, you guys all know way better than me, but some community boards are stricter and some are less strict. But it's my understanding through Community Board 7 that it's pretty often that some members are sick or some members have community caring responsibilities or illness or some disability that it's important to give them flexibility with respect to in-person quorum.
So Evan, it sounds like you're saying that it isn't the case that people are saying, hey, I just got stuck in the office. I really want to participate, but I just can't be there in person. It sounds like you're saying it's more caregiving or illness. Is that right?
I mean, those are the circumstances that are particularly foreseen by the law. But again, community boards have some flexibility with respect to what they want to interpret as an extraordinary circumstance. But my understanding is it's pretty often that people have some sort of extraordinary circumstance. I'm sure that this CB4 knows way better than me how it looks like in real life.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Yeah.
I do have two concerns, Brad, if you're still there. First of all, if you could put in that everybody has to attend in person. Okay, not just us, that would be nice, but my more important question, Brad, is this. During COVID, we were not allowed to have a protocol for people coming to attend our meetings in public, in person. We could not impose a protocol. In other words, we could not say everybody has to wear a mask. We could ask, but we could not say that. So essentially, we were put in danger because we were required to meet in person with the public, but we could not
Protect
create
yourself, right?
protocols to protect ourselves. I cannot imagine a corporate office not allowing its employees to protect themselves. Maybe your office would do the same thing, but we were not allowed to. Now, bird flu is going to be upon us, God forbid, but if it is, can you craft some legislation to give the office the ability to mandate a protocol for the public? Would that be possible? We have folks who may be immunocompromised who are board members. We need to protect ourselves.
Well, I think you may have that ability to a certain extent already to set guidelines in terms of mask wearing and the like. I mean, I think that's silent. The open meetings law is silent on those points.
Well,
Is there something you're looking for in particular?
Well, we don't always have the ability to meet here. We have to beg and get a place to meet sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, can I? Yeah, I think maybe offline conversation is good because it's broadening into going into a different area of concern, but I would be happy to talk to Evan maybe offline and Sam and give you some further insight.
Great.
I think we were in a situation where we were being told that we had to hold, public meetings, but we were being at the same time, we couldn't demand anybody to wear a mask. We couldn't require vaccination as
Oh,
a
I
way
see.
of entry into
Yeah.
those types of things. And so a lot of members felt like we were being told that we gotta follow all these rules and what's best in public health rules, but then, we
Yeah.
were putting ourselves into these environments that were, were unchecked. We as a body could not guarantee, not only our members, members' health, but, people from the public coming in. I couldn't make anybody wear a mask. I couldn't, any of that. So, so that's what I think JD is referring to. I mean, I don't know whether that's something, I think that's connected very much to probably the trigger being an emergency order from the city or the state.
Yes,
and
from the
something along
governor.
those lines. Happy to talk about that with Evan and see if there's some possibility of a workaround to allow that, if and when we ever get to that situation where people are triggering emergency orders again.
God forbid, but yes, that's something to look toward for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, JD. I think we would just, to just emphasize, thankfully, with the exception of a meeting that just took place before this, we have not had to confront the issue of quorum, in a significant way. And we have also really, appreciated how much our board and committee members are showing up in public or in person, excuse me, and think that that is really valuable to the work that we have to do, and would not want to do anything that needs to alter that. And so recognizing that other boards have other circumstances, I think, we acknowledge the opportunity to have legislation that can favor them or create space for them. I would say that the point of making sure that it is a minimum and not a requirement to adopt these would be, really important so that we can ultimately adopt the policy that works best for our board.
One reaction, really gut reaction, I think 33% would be good. 25 sounds really low. For all the reasons we talked about, making sure that people participate in person, etc. But that's very personal.
Okay, just, there's some nods around this room at that, but I don't think any additional comments. I also just want to add, not related to the legislation, but, and maybe you heard me at the beginning say, hosting meetings in this hybrid format is very burdensome for all boards. And also because of the expectations that people can participate remotely, which we think there is value, particularly in keeping people healthy and safe and not overcrowding and all of those things. It puts even greater pressure on ensuring we have the right systems that facilitate hybrid participation. And when it goes wrong, it can feel like it can feel very bad because then you're not just not hearing from someone, you can't hear them, and you've invited them in, and then you have this, it feels worse than if they hadn't been at times heard at all. And so with that, we're hoping to make we're going to discuss now, but if we want to consider making a request together with other Manhattan community boards or other boards across the city to the city for additional funding to ensure that we all have the systems, the staffing, the support to be able to maintain and fulfill the opportunity of hybrid meetings.
Yeah, well, and it would be really helpful if, I don't have an ability as a state senator to raise an issue to the borough board, but this may be something that, notwithstanding the borough president's support last session, this may be something you would want to bring up at the borough board.
And sorry, yes, I shared that at just before you joined. Apologies for not mentioning it again, but it did come up at borough board, and CB7 mentioned it as well. Mentioned their concerns. I mentioned that ours is more technology focused, but we are discussing, will be discussing in February, potentially a joint letter or a joint effort to try to secure those resources.
Excellent.
Okay, so with that, we're gonna, unless Evan, is there anything else you'd want to hear from us?
No, thank you so much for having me and the senator.
Yes. Thank you both for making the time.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you
Okay.
showing up.
See you virtually next time. Bye.
So just, I don't wanna belabor it, but I do, just Jesse, is there anything you wanna add about like what would be ultimately most helpful for facilitating, easing the burden around hybrid and just make sure there's consensus?
Yeah, I mean, I really defer to each board, and so, I mean, I think, I think just funding, there's it's just, that's all it is. We use a vendor, as you guys have all seen him, he was a vendor, it's funny, he was a vendor. If you look at his website, he has a great team, but predominantly their bread and butter is like graduation photos and prom videos and stuff like that, right? So this was his world. He was working with CB2 here and there before COVID, COVID hit. I was smart enough to realize, not smart enough, something happened to me where I was like, I need this guy, I'm gonna need him in 6 months or 8 months. We don't need him now, because we're like all virtual completely 100%. But we tracked him down and got him and front loaded him with a lot of money. So so he couldn't say no. And so that's what we've been doing. And so, but every board is different. And so some boards are doing the owl really well, like I think we do. And other boards are, using different locations and all of that. So I think each board just needs the flexibility of getting a chunk of money put into their OTPS accounts to allow for either rental of space, renting of a vendor, and that's the other thing too, there's a run on vendors, like this guy is maxed out, I can tell you, and so that's why he's expanded. Sometimes we've been to meetings where he'll have just owls, because he's not gonna have the staff to do the camera work. So, so I think every board's gonna be able to pivot as it goes, so that would be my recommendation, it's just money.
What about the staff? I mean, we have all the staff staying for all the meetings fairly late.
Yeah.
And are they compensated for that?
I mean, it's their union, so they have a contract and they get comp time and
Okay.
all of that is, I mean, in terms of like problems that I can deal with and I can't deal with, like at some point, that chicken has come home to roost. I'm gonna have a staff that's got a load of comp time that I'm gonna have to deal with. And so, but they're not squawking and I'm not freaking out about it yet, so.
I mean, you could have, if you had the money, you could have a temp in the evening. You could have a temp in the evening doing the work.
I'm sorry, what?
If
You
you.
can hire somebody.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a
But you could have
possibility.
a temp where you say, hey, you come to all the meeting at night, right?
Yeah, that is a very strong possibility. CB7 has something like that. They actually hire out the other part of this for us is that we will have a permanent space, right? Fingers crossed, I'm saying by October this year. And so, the other part is that I'm not gonna spend a lot of money setting up.
Right.
So what they did is they had them come in, set up a whole setup in their office. And then the person just comes in and they hire an outside person to come in and
But is that
manage it.
OTPS or is that?
It's all OTPS, yeah.
So that fund can still go to that?
Yeah,
because-
Yeah. I'm just saying,
So-
do we need to ask for it, to ask more of it? If we have an ask, should ask more of it?
Yeah, I mean,
Beyond
we should.
technology and for staffing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you can't do anything specific in the community board world, right? Everything's gonna be for 59.
No,
votes,
that's
right?
what I'm saying.
So I say like,
Right.
I don't know what the budget is, I could throw together an idea, but again, every board's so different but I would say somewhere between like $10,000 and $15,000 for each board to do what they wanna do, to manage how they wanna manage it, One of these things costs a little more than $1,000, right? So I'm thinking like, if you're gonna buy a few of those and then hire out somebody and stuff like that,
Or a big screen.
yeah, a big screen's gonna cost you, so, what I'm hoping is that when we move into our new space, we're gonna have that, we're gonna have a smart screen, we're gonna have, we're gonna actually get an owl bar, so that covers the whole room. And so we'll have multiple screens on the walls, and so, that hopefully.
So, okay, yeah,
This doesn't really change it. Still have to have the quorum, you still have to have the excuse, at least for our board.
Yeah.
This only helps other boards, because I guess they could give more excuses out.
I mean, I think,
seriously.
if you're talking about the legislation, I think it's like as Jessica said, it's a minimum. So I think if there's ever, if if this passes, if that legislation passes, or some version of it passes. I don't think it'd be foolhardy for us not to revise our hybrid policy and include it as a fail-safe, like, you know, worst case scenario. We have to hold an exec as an important vote, and if something happens and I can't get 51% of people in the room to vote on something that we all know we really need to vote on, but I can get 25, like.
Well,
That's like, but that is not what we normally do.
You would expand the excuses to meet.
It's not expanding the excuses, it's just accepting the fact that you only need 25 in quorum. And
In the room.
in the room, sorry, 25% of people to count as quorum in the room. And then that would allow you, everybody else would still be virtual, and so, but again, I don't think. Again, we're not there yet, this legislation hasn't passed, and we haven't had the
Thank you.
conversation, so,
It may not pass.
yeah.
It didn't pass the last time, it may not pass this time, so let's go by the rules we have now,
Yeah,
and when the time comes.
and even if it does pass, it doesn't change the rules we have now.
And it expires in 2026, which is like tomorrow.
Well, that's the point though I wanted to make, is your point is very good, and why don't we try to push Brad to change the expiration date?
Yeah,
Because
I think
a big
amendments,
deal.
I think amendments to the open meeting law are a lot easier to swallow for some reason on a state level than an actual changing of the law. Amending the law to every 2 years with a deadline of every 2 years seems to politically work rather than saying, we're gonna open up the books and change the open meetings law. So the
That's
rest
why we
through the
don't
rest
get
of the
any
days.
done.
I'd like to move us on, we have other topics, but,
Thank you.
sorry, but thank you, and Roberta, I saw you nodding, and so we'll take that. To see your affirmation, we're good, great. I'm gonna move on to, the second item, which is the report on the Dewitt Clinton Park North project, and is currently at Clinton House Kitchen Land Use, returning to JD.
Sure, I'll try to be brief. There's an application, not in quite yet, but some people are gonna apply to build 2 buildings. One on 54th Street near either Clinton Park and one on 11th Avenue between 55th and 56th. It's not for residential zone at the moment. They want to change the zoning so they can build mixed use buildings, keep the auto repair, auto distributor on 54th Street, Dewitt Clinton, but build affordable housing, a number of units, affordable housing, market rate housing. So they came, Paula and I and Joe had an informal meeting with them, because an informal meeting is to prepare them to come to the committee. Because bring these slides, blah, blah, blah. The last moment, they did not come to the committee. Don't know why. I think they heard that Paul was co-chair, so they did not. They did not come to the committee, so we were stuck. And Paul and I asked Joe to reiterate what we had talked about at the informal meeting, and then we assigned to the committee members elements of the scoping for the environmental review, write up, get back to us. I'll prepare a letter for the full board. In the meantime, there's a public review, which we're invited to on Thursday, the 30th. This is before we've written the letter and gone through the public process. So I'm bringing this to the committee now to get permission, if we want to assign Paul to go to the public meeting and speak on it, or Joe, or me, or someone.
By public meeting, city planning?
City
Yeah,
council.
we're at the
I'm
draft
sorry.
scope
Yes.
stage of the process, and so we want to ask the questions to put into the scope, because we keep in mind the environmental impact study comes out after the draft impact study, just after the scope, which is after the draft scope. So this draft scope stage is the point at which we can really try to insert the most we can insert.
And can you
What?
speak
Yeah.
to what you might say after
Yeah.
This
Helicopter pad on the roof. Can you study the impact of moving the helipad off the river and?
To this. It's a good idea.
What are our main concerns?
We're not against this.
Yeah.
Probably not against this because it's gonna produce about, 1,000 units, maybe 30% will be affordable, and that's a good thing. The money will go to the Hudson River Park. because that's part of the sub-district where you build a building, they get some money from that, so that's good. There's an auto dealership they may preserve, so the brewer will be happy that it's her district. So we're not against this. The questions we will have will be transportation questions about the impact on Dewitt Park, which is right next door. There's more people going there. The height of the building, one's going to be 65 stories, I think. 42 stories is one, 38 stories is the other. We're always concerned if they can lower the height, increase the bulk, lower the height, but still get the same number of units. There's questions about that. It's just stuff like that.
And one of the sites is in the housing plan. I want to note that one is not.
Correct.
And sorry, so we just plan on asking questions.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is that this is also the stage that we can ask them to offer an alternative proposal and study the alternative.
Mhm.
So this makes sense for us to now say, lower height, keep the density high, because we're going to be accepting development rights from the Hudson River Trust on, it's going to be a receiving site for those development rights. So we're gonna move those development rights over, so we are not opposed to higher density, but we always oppose higher height. We also have more height closer to the river and lower height east, so the two sites, one's closer to the river, one's farther from the river. So maybe shifting some of the height allocation and for them to study an alternative that would be lower height, same number of units, maybe higher percentage of affordable, something along those lines, but create an alternative proposal they could review.
I'm not the always opposed to higher height. I mean, I understand believe me, I understand the rationale for it. It's in the river, it's casting shadows, and it makes sense to see what else they can do. I just want to make sure that we're not ourselves casting a shadow on the building.
Right, no, and I think that to address the height issue, I mean, we have struggled a lot with height concerns. And within our housing plan, we have sites that we determine are high density, high height, build. Other parts are not. Because as Jessica points out, one of these is outside of our housing plan and one is inside our housing plan. The setting of precedent for other developers to come along later and say, well, you built really tall here because we are now going to be confronting the Intrepid parking lot site. And, you know, to say we have a 65-story building north of Dewitt Clinton, and then the Intrepid site, they come along and say, you did 65 stories here, why can't we do 65 stories here? So the height is a kind of continual conversation about the integrity of the whole zone.
Is our housing plan, and this is my knowledge on this, is it the primary differentiation between sites that are in and not? Is it about height specifically?
It's not about height specifically, it's about density.
Yeah, right.
And affordability, but density leads to height eventually.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just saying, like, if we don't actually know about shadows in this particular, it's possible, right, that both of these sites would actually be perfect for higher density and higher, I mean, who knows? And so I feel like we're not.
Well, but that's actually the point of the study, right, is that if you say this, the question you raised, what's the impact of the shadows?
Right.
So let's do an alternative and let's see what the impact of the shadows is. They can compare the shadow analysis of their proposal and an alternative proposal so that we can understand just what you're asking.
Because if we don't ask for the alternative, we won't know the answer to that, and then we'll be in a place of speculating. We might not like the results of this, but we didn't ask them to study anything else, and so we have no way of beginning to suggest or begin to compromise, say, well, we have this on this hand and this on the other, and how do we work towards compromise? So this offers us data points of someplace in the middle to then seek someplace perhaps in the middle, or maybe not, maybe maybe it's exactly right.
Because this process will come through and then there'll be a ULURP on this as well. So the process will be the environmental impact study, then they'll at the continuous time run a ULURP process. So by studying what we study now, asking them to study now, what will be then presented later helps us answer your questions that you're raising.
I don't think we're asking to reduce.
No, I know that, that's just, you're just wondering, I understand, but I just didn't wanna.
My understanding, just so that I'm clear, you're going to be indicating questions so that it can be included in the study to help us make an informed
Correct,
decision.
correct.
Where is this in relation to PS 111 that's on West 33rd and 10th Avenue?
This is on 54th and 12th Avenue. and then 11th Avenue between 55th and.
So,
Okay, so
so you know,
something
you know where
that
Dewitt
is-
Clinton Park is?
Yeah.
The Dewitt Clinton Park is here, the river's here, it's this tower here, this Jeep dealership.
But the
And this
kids
corner
in
of
this,
the other
are you
corner.
asking like, will the kids who are eventually here be zoned for this school?
They will have to do a study.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna say.
I mean, it'll be included in this.
They're clarifying, I think they acknowledged it in the briefing that it was gonna trigger a school city.
All right, so automatically with an EIS, if there's 1,800 units, it automatically triggers a school analysis. If this doesn't trigger that, that's something that we would make sure that we insert.
Yeah.
Because the cumulative effect of the developments in the neighborhood, even though this may not be at the trigger point for the EIS and secret regulations may not require it, we're gonna probably ask for it if it's not already triggered.
Are you going to ask for the cumulative with the cornerstone above, which was recently constructed?
The cereal box building?
Whatever it is
Which
on
one?
57 to 56, the very large building,
That's a big-
TF cornerstone.
The tip,
Right.
is that considered new still? I mean, that,
It's fairly recent. I don't know, I would ask in your
yeah, okay, that's,
cumulative
yeah, that's
question
worth,
is
because
to
there
integrate
are a
that.
number of them are around there. And we
Yeah.
also, by the way, know that the CBS building block.
Right, is going
That
to be.
entire block
Right.
is under. is
But I
coming
would,
forward
so I
too,
would
that
ask
would be
that
another
cumulative.
Entire block is what, sorry?
Is coming forward for what?
What?
Complete redevelopment of housing.
Right.
The CBS studios.
Conversion.
These are tall buildings.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, so the cumulative impact.
The city gas?
No,
It's unrelated.
The cumulative impact is really critical, and I think
Yes.
that you're right on that. We'll add in a way of chief cornerstone, and there's that white building right there as well. It's not a lot, but it's some.
So, are they going to, remove the cap there or not? Are we removing the cap?
The residential.
The
I
12
know.
FAR,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah, for everybody else, the 12 FAR cap. I don't recall them saying we're gonna go over 12 FAR there now.
Okay,
But they did not come to the committee, so we don't. have
Right.
answers to all the questions.
and finally, the, automotive use. Okay.
We're gonna ask if it could be a bicycle repair.
No, major, I don't know where it should be, but the study of, supermarkets, etc. This is way up there, there is nothing there.
They don't know yet.
There is nothing there. And then when you have the
So-
automotive use,
So
you have
I'm gonna
those.
ask you, I'm gonna
huge-
ask you that question though, because you've done more, as many of these as I have, I think, to the EIS. What portion can we ask for community, so I think we can maybe talk about community facility.
Yeah.
Analysis, and the
Yeah.
community facility. would include
And maybe we
safety,
can say,
community
this,
services.
like, community
and
services,
the
and there is no
things
food, there is nothing there.
I
So-
still walks away.
Huh?
The supermarkets on Ninth Avenue between
Yeah,
54.
Everybody's Instacart now anyways, Christian, get
This
up
is
with that.
11, this is 11.
It's home deliveries now anyway, Christian, come on.
Oh, yeah.
This is-
We need a vote.
We can even vote, I do
Yeah,
want
so-
to just represent, as I said earlier, that WPE is not here, and I know you well represent the issues of the park. That park in particular, but make sure that they are also consulted.
She was consulted.
And we have comments from transportation,
Yeah.
WPE. We have some stuff on construction and noise issues that we typically ask about. Because it's so close to the river, we want to do some analysis on water shocks. The shadows cast on the river, because the sun will be coming up and the shadows will be cast. The groundwater treatment, because there could be, it's automotive repair shops. My suspicion is I was taught when I changed my oil to dump the oil behind the garage, right? So there may be some contaminants in the soils there. I want to make sure that those are studied as well. Yeah.
They always say.
They always say that, but like to make
And the
sure
noise related to the park as far as construction.
construction noise impacts.
on the park.
I think what's interesting about the park, which I will raise at some point if I can, the money goes to the Hudson River Park. And yet they say, right, it's to Dewitt Park, it's gonna be great, but no money goes to Dewitt Park. It all goes across the highway.
And to be, just to clarify a little bit on why the money's going to the park is they're selling. They're selling their development
But
areas.
that's a good.
But that is a good point that we need more funding for the park that they're calling this the Dewitt Clinton development.
Just pointing out that something,
Yeah.
You're going to.
So we need as Jesse said, we need to take a vote on this, which is, as I understand it, effectively allowing you, Paul, to provide testimony during the hearing. But we know also that this will continue to be discussed and fleshed out further at subsequent, Clinton Health.
Right, and for clarification, this is so that I can do a 2-minute. We only get 2 minutes in this hearing, so I'm gonna do 2 minutes at the hearing, raise our overall concerns. A full letter will come out from board that will be submitted as full commentary within the
Yeah.
commentary.
By
By the Friday after the board meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Next
like,
Friday.
by this Friday.
By this
no,
Friday.
that's right.
Oh, because it has to be in the Dropbox.
By this
We
Friday.
have until the 10th of February to submit in writing. So what I will do is cobble something together by Friday. So you can have it at the full board meeting. And I'm gonna request.
What's in there?
Well, board is next week.
I ain't writing this one.
Let's-
I did West.
But we got it.
Okay, so if we.
And I'm doing
can-
MSMS.
would be comfortable.
I just have one request, I'll talk to Paul about this. The committee is doing the work on this. Rachel is doing work, you're doing work, Sanford is doing work. I would like them at the full board meeting to stand up and deliver each one item of what they're discussing, because it's important that they start
Yeah.
participating in a small way. I will not warn them because I weren't there.
Well, that we can talk about offline.
Okay.
But,
Anyway, so.
but thank you for mentioning that, and in the spirit of board engagement, I think that's
Yeah.
terrific. But can we get a motion?
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Only if.
I can't make the motion.
Okay, any opposed? Any present not eligible or abstaining? Okay, great. Godspeed.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Shady.
Okay, I think we're turning this to Roberta. We are up to, Roberta, does this work? We're up to our update for response to mayor's preliminary budget.
So very briefly, we did have a meeting of the budget task force. It did not have quorum, but it was prior to this meeting. The discussion was very productive. We're working on a letter with a framework responding to the summary of Mayor Adams' proposed executive budget for the city. The framework being kind of responses to social services, responses to safety, responses to housing and affordability, quality of life, education, and then sort of recapping some of the outstanding items that city agencies have indicated that they are not interested in supporting. It will have many thank yous, many notes of appreciation of things that we think are going well, and then it will, sort of push back in areas where we felt less strongly. Very much pulls from the responses that we received back from the agencies, I think this past week, in terms of the statement of district needs requests. So that will be available at latest by Friday, and would encourage you to take a look. And if you feel that something is missing or that we're not capturing the tone with those top areas engaging with the mayor's budget framework, then we can take some friendly amendments.
Thank you, Roberta. Anyone have any questions, comments?
I'll just add that the responses that are on the website, I can certainly send them around to everybody here, but they're also just in the Dropbox as well, so.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go now to our next agenda item, which is, as you all know, that at the last several meetings since I think October, we've been doing updates from committees, help us all feel more informed on what's going on. Just even thinking about providing a chair update today, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on, and obviously it all lives and should live in committee. And so hearing from task force committee chairs about their perspective on what's ahead of them, I think is beneficial, both for the committee chairs as they think about their work ahead, but also for us as exec, and particularly for the connections that we want to make in our committees or in our own work related to the updates that we hear today. So this evening we have Housing, Health, and Human Services. Unfortunately, Joe has a family issue this evening or right now, so he's not joining us. But we'll look forward to hearing from Maria, and then we'll be followed by ERP.
So looking forward, some of the things that we've talked about, we have a tentative agenda actually for the remainder of the, I feel like saying academic year, but it's not really, you know what I mean. I don't know what I mean. One of the things that Joe and I are talking about is having NYCHA come to committee. What topic exactly? It would be the proposed plan, right? But what specifically we haven't decided on. We have Health and Hospitals Corporation and DHS. That was something on our agenda. The reason why was because of the teens that are undocumented who were ending up at adult shelters instead of being at a different site. However, the Health and Hospitals Corporation site that we have in our district is on 57th Street for Watson, but that's going to be closing. So I don't know, this is all kind of, you know, emotion and influx, but that's something that we wanted to have coming up. Also, we had talked about HPD and capital projects that are occurring within the district. We've also talked about the bridge program related to folks who have serious mental health issues and DFTA, Department for the Aging, and specifically talking about or learning more about the needs that they have at this time. So when exactly is which topic, I'm not sure yet, but we have a tentative agenda, but we are meeting with Nellie tomorrow to tighten up our agenda. The next comments, questions, comments, starting with Paul, you raised your hand?
Okay, I'm sorry. What's the situation with Ryan Clinic?
Which situation are you referring to?
I was under the impression, I heard that they were in really dire straits financially. It's on 46th Street, right? On 46th, is that okay?
So Ryan Health has several sites within Manhattan, and they have one board. Ryan Chelsea Clinton on 46th and 10th have a different board, so financially they're in very different situation.
So
RCC on 46th and 10th is doing well.
okay, all right. There is a response on the budget about Brian request we had from Brian, so you and the second question I have is
Sorry, just before you move on,
I was gonna mention.
Sure.
I was going to say, also because I work there, I am just not comfortable, honestly, like presenting everything about Ryan Health, so.
yeah, I think that's totally
That's
reasonable. And we just, for everyone else, I remind folks, I think most of you know, but when this issue of Ryan coming out of PS 11, right? PS 11, we were alerted, we were concerned, we had I guess with Eric come and speak about that at ACES. And so I think in part, it's on your radar because of that and that discussion. And so anyway, just, I think that's the theme is like, is there more, not you personally, Maria, but more that the committee or the board should be doing to make sure that where they are providing critical services, we don't have an abrupt gap, as we saw with PS 11 is maybe another way.
Well, there was a letter that went out that I saw that parents received. I believe it was, the point is that the letter did mention that some of the sites were closing because demographics within the school had changed. And I believe that that's true for PS 11. I mean, I didn't go to PS 11, I went to Clinton, but which was in the same building as PS 11 when I attended. And I went to PS 33, the demographics were very different when I went to those schools.
That's true, but Ryan Health said that they are going to be looking at PS 33 as a possibility because that demographic has also changed, and that's a school that could really use a clinic inside the school, so.
Good, great. And so I have a second question, which is on affordable housing. Long time ago when I was chair, we got EDC to bid out on to Slaughterhouse, the Slaughterhouse site, which is on between, you know, on 11th Avenue.
Yeah.
And it looked like it was a done deal. Right? And we're talking about a 500 apartment, affordable apartment. That's a huge amount of affordable housing. So my question has been, why isn't it going? I heard
Can you
people.
just remind me, Slaughterhouse site is on the west side of that avenue or
Yes.
the east side?
Yes,
It's on the west.
right. Well, where the parking lot, the parking for the police is. Just north of the
Jacob's Javits, right? Okay.
So it looks like at the time, everything was, you know, cooking and going and everything was fine. They were ready. They had plans, they had approvals, they had everything. And then it died. And I heard that it was because of financing. And now that we have the city of Yes and a lot of money for creating affordable housing, I wonder, you know, I wish we would re-engage with the DC and re-engage with the developer and say, okay, what do you need?
Yeah.
What do we do, etc. Because again, we're talking about 500 apartments, affordable apartment, 100% affordable apartments. This is,
Can I jump in? Can I?
yes.
We are. The answer is we are
Yes.
re-engaging.
Oh,
Yes.
We are re-engaging. That's not to say that it should not be a topic of discussion at Triple HS,
Right.
but I just want Maria to know as well that we are, per your advocacy.
Cool.
Because I think we all agree,
Yeah.
like, it's been too long, and we were engaging EDC to find out why it's not moving
And
forward.
we've asked electeds to help get
Right.
EDC to the table.
Yeah,
But I think this actually speaks to a broader issue and connects to the housing, the comment about the site we were just talking about previously, which is, I would love to see or have a conversation, we can also do this offline, but like, where does continuing to revisit the housing plan fit into the agenda? And
Yeah.
you have a lengthy list there, and the issue of NYCHA is, I know, gonna take up even more time at your committee, as it will Clue, but I think figuring out how we can, maybe we have a subcommittee or or a task force or something, I don't know, sorry, Jesse. Something that like allows there to be a revisiting of the housing plan, looking at stalled sites, looking at new opportunities, what else should be there in light of City of Yes, but all of those things. And I know that burden also will naturally just not only fall to housing, but to Joe in particular. So, you know, it would be good to have that conversation with him as well, but as you think about it and as you need to, hopefully that can be included. And you asked about the lifting the cap, like all of those things.
Yeah, which side are we going to lift the cap
Well,
on,
Luke's got-
right? Yes, you but that's
You called
part
me
of
first,
the,
we're-
but the first one was this one, which I mean, you know, it was very at the time, we had to do a very heavy lift to get that done, and we were very proud, and then nothing happened, which is really breaks my heart, because it includes some of the commitment of the Western Rail Yard. So now we're saying, you know, people have broken the commitment, but
true.
some of the things we were committed to and we executed are now not happening. So
Yeah.
this is
So we
this is
visit
kind of
that.
coming into the same package, saying we better put, you know, foot to the pedal on that.
And I'm curious if anyone else had their hand up, Paul.
Jesse, you didn't.
I did, but I'm
The things that, just to think about in terms of kind of long range planning, a lot of the stuff that overlaps with Hell's Kitchen land use particularly, seems like a lot of the stuff we always struggle with, go to housing or Hell's Kitchen land use. But to think about it as was talked, revisiting the housing plan and specifically about the 12 FAR cap being lifted and how do we prioritize locations for higher density housing? That's gonna, I think, be a joint thing. And we've talked at Hell's Kitchen land use about trying to tackle that and bring it forward, and another ULIP comes forward, another scoping process comes forward, so we keep putting it to the back burner, but having HHHS sort of being thinking about that. And the other thing that will also come likely through Hell's Kitchen land use is the demolition by neglect concerns, and how that is gonna be exacerbated by CDPS and the potential damage to Hell's Kitchen if more neglect occurs to allow for further demolition. So how does that interact with housing and not just Hell's Kitchen land use? Just as looking at me like you're insane.
I ditto that, Paul. Thank you for clue.
Yeah.
I think
Thank you.
JD and JD.
Oh, sorry, now, I'll go back in. I just wanted to, have we already taken positions either actually on or tangential to the bills on mental health that are being proposed either by our state senators, assembly person, Tony Simone, or Quattro? They each have like a different
Yeah, I know.
thing, and I would love to like be able to sort of dig in on that.
Yes, thank you for asking the social worker co-chair of Housing Health and Services. Yes, so actually I was thinking it, but I hadn't said it yet. But that's part of the reason that actually came up a few months ago. When we came up with a tentative list, it was actually in December, if not sooner, for some of the things we wanted to have moving forward. And before the bills that are coming out now are being discussed in a more public kind of way, we had already started. That was one of the issues on my mind, was talking about that. At any rate, so yes. But right now, what I had mentioned was the bridge program, but that could change. But the point is that on letters specifically related to a bill around those things that have just come up, no, that we're hearing about more, no. But that's something that I would like for us to do.
Great.
Yeah, that's good. I do have two things. One, if NYCHA comes, then I can there be an excuse to miss that meeting.
Yeah.
Only it's the new open law.
This is totally off the wall. I know there's no answer to this, but the Trump administration is just, they canceled communications with the Department of Health. So we don't know until February. We don't know what's going on. In other words, if bird flu was around, we wouldn't know about it. They cut off communication.
With the who, with, yeah, with the
No,
West.
no, our National Institute of Health.
They've issued a moratorium on external communications.
Now, this is,
Oh, I didn't realize that.
This is
When
very-
did that happen? Like 2 hours?
Like 2 hours ago.
scary stuff. So
That's crazy.
we have a responsibility to get information out to our community, but we cannot get it. So how can we, I mean, Gerald Nadler must know things. Can we?
Why
Some
things?
Can we?
I'm serious. No, I'm serious. I'm trying to answer your question. I mean, I think we have to, I mean, we have, that doesn't stop the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene,
That's right.
which is one of the largest
Do their job.
agencies
Right.
of this, and when they're supposed to do their job, exactly. And so I would, not to say that we should solely rely on them and expect them to give us every piece of information, but I don't think we're gonna be in a information desert if it came to something of that nature.
I
And so,
agree, Jess. So I'm asking if we can be a little more proactive in some way to get that information.
okay,
Because it's vital. And
Yeah.
this is dangerous.
yeah, I think that's something, I think that's a great question to raise. I don't know if it needs to be necessary. I mean, it could be, we can certainly invite Department of Health to find out what they are doing with it because of the decisions that are being made on a federal level, what they are, what kind of, things they're putting in place to make sure that they do get all the information. I'm sure they'll have the answer.
Do you think they would be open to that?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
completely.
I would say, I don't even know, obviously health is, without it, there's nothing, but I would just say that we rely on the federal government for a lot of information, and so the Department of Health is one piece of that, but maybe we could look to see who in the city could offer some information about how we should expect information, to.
I mean, I'm happy to talk to Rob Guyton too, but I'm not just saying,
Who's that?
Rob Guyton works for Jerry Maverick.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
In a broader sense, I'm saying with health particularly with health concerns, I think we should rely on the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. I'm sure that they are preparing for this situation.
Yeah.
And Katie's online, and then we'll let her.
Right,
talk
I
about
still like that
Yeah.
suggestion.
Thanks. I think these all, are such great ideas, and I really like the focus on the mental health stuff. But I guess I have a question. I don't have a sense if we're getting information or how we are tracking what's happening to any of our families and public school kids who don't have legal status.
The letter coming.
Yeah, and I
So
guess I'm
wait-
just wondering, like, if should we reach out to the schools or to somebody to give us an update on that?
I think there's something about, we don't have, it's illegal to know a lot of, they don't have all the information themselves. Right, so the status of certain kids is just not available, so I certainly don't know if we're going to be able to pull anything on it.
Well,
Yeah,
can we start to find out though if kids are no longer showing up to school? I mean, just if attendance rates are dropping, that could be a indicator. I mean, I think they already have it around the country just because the parents are afraid to send their kids to school.
But then we
Is
can't
that
do
a-
anything
Is
about
that
it.
a DOE?
I don't.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
It sounds like an
Let's
ace.
talk about it. I think Josephine is right. We can go down a lot of different paths. I don't know really what it's gonna result in and how much information it's gonna get, but that's certainly an ace question.
Yeah, and I guess I was also thinking though of the link to our shelters and whether or not if there have been ICE visits to our shelters and how that's being handled.
I can certainly ask, but the reality is, I think as the mayor announced, that, most shelters in terms of that were predominantly for migrants are being shut down.
Yeah.
So, especially the ones in our district, so,
I mean,
but I can certainly ask.
it's such a fluid situation that, we felt the best thing to do. The PEP had put out a resolution just basically supporting what the DOE already supports about welcoming all students, and they, ICE currently, under the chancellor's regulations, are not allowed in schools. But, we can, so we're writing a letter to support that, but that doesn't, does that really mean anything? That could change tomorrow. We don't know really what the mayor's doing, so we can't chase down every little thing. It's not, right, but we are writing a letter, so we'll see it, at full
Great.
force.
Okay, thanks.
And I was just gonna share, I did speak to a principal over the weekend who was in our district, and it's exactly what you just mentioned, Effie. Parents have said to him, they're afraid to send their children to school, they're just gonna keep them home, and he said to me, I don't know. They're more protected being here at school than they are staying in shelter, ICE agents can go in there, so. But he understands their fears and concerns, like walking to school, we don't know if they will be snatched up, right, so.
And I think the parents are equally afraid that while their kids at school, they are
To be
taken,
separated,
they're more.
They would be separated, yes, I can't even imagine.
I cannot.
That's terrifying.
So I just want to ask, and maybe this isn't just about, because it isn't just about the committee's agenda necessarily, but I mean, specific to the number of communications or resources that New Yorkers need right now because of their fears about health, their concerns about immigration status or work authorization, et cetera. Do we have a role? And again, I don't want to make this about this is your committee, but I'm just curious. What do we see as our role in terms of sharing information? Right? I mean, again, like the city produces content, resource lists, communications. I don't know how much the community board receives in terms of those communications. So I'm just curious about, would it be really critical right now that if this is a value to us, that we're sure that the community board has some sort of space to be able to collect and capture information that we can share with the community, that's the most quote unquote up to date that we can assess based on what we receive from city government.
I think what the most helpful would be like, if you guys wanna give me a mandate to focus on health, public health and immigration stuff. We have a newsletter that goes out twice a month. We have access to the link kiosks. So we can focus on that, and that's what you guys want like us to focus on. We can try to focus on that. So.
Sorry, have we access to like chaos, meaning like we could put out our own messaging if we wanted to?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have,
Have we have?
and we
Yeah.
have, the link,
I mean, it's pretty PC.
Yeah,
like,
but it's
pretty
not the
hard
way
to-
to-
that's the, yeah, I mean, right,
It's not nothing.
Yeah, no, it's not. So we're not, so I have not been told no yet by Link NYC, so, and agencies have been told no, so I will keep on going until they tell me no. Yeah, it can't be provocative, it can't, you know.
No,
But
if
we
it's
have done
sharing-
stuff for the cruise terminal survey that just went out, that's us. We chose to do that because EDC couldn't do it. We chose to do that, like, there's the ones in the past, any type of event that we do the code drive, we sent something out on the code drive, so we can do something like that. So if, and if you have that information, if you get it across your, you know, emails, send them to us. I mean, there's nothing hindering us.
There are a number of resource lists and communications, some I get, some I don't, just based on what I see.
Yeah, sure.
From city agencies, I'm also from city council.
Sure.
that I would.
Yeah, listen, I mean, we're a city agency, I'd love to say that we.
Yeah, I know.
But we have literally Janine is like the episode in the middle and the end of all communications. You know, I help her like putting it all together, but like, we're like choosing what goes in there, but it's literally Janine, so.
Thank you. I didn't mean to take away from that.
It's all right for
Thank you.
DLP.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and similarly though, Frank is in a similar hot seat, representing VLP this evening, and Langford is, unable to join us, so he's.
Well, I think half the people at this meeting are on BLP, so I'll try not to bore everyone too much. So I think everyone knows BLP basically handles two things, analyzing and recommending approval on liquor licenses and outdoor dining. And we also handle affiliated complaints with the two of those. As I think you've seen, we typically have 20 to 25 things on our agenda, and each of those has a significant amount of paperwork, communications with applicants, with the community. And I just want to give a big shout out to Nelly Gonzalez, our assistant district manager, who I don't know about the support for other committees, but I gotta think she has a huge workload with this stuff and has really been doing a terrific job. In terms of the committee, what we're starting to see is that the balance had long been more liquor licenses than outdoor dining, because the outdoor dining under the old Department of Consumer Affairs product had been well established. People just renewed things. What's happening now, when permanent dining was finally approved last spring, is that anyone who wants to do outdoor dining has to reapply. So basically, anyone who wants a sidewalk cafe, anyone who wants a roadway dining is reapplying now, which means the amount of time we're spending on outdoor dining is going way up. The other thing with the new program, which is under the Department of Transportation, is the timing of the whole thing is much more out of our control and even the control of the applicants. With liquor licenses, basically the applicants applied, we could work with the applicants to work up the timing and the SLA would go along with it. Now the DOT is really this sort of funnel to the applications. Everything goes through the DOT first. So applicants apply to the DOT theoretically reviews them and then sends them on to us. So that's a sort of major bottleneck right there, because we feel we've probably seen maybe 10% of the outdoor dining applications that are to come in this district. And so far the pipeline hasn't increased. But again, it's really because the pacing of it is all controlled by DOT. The other things I think people have seen is the other agencies were always much more lenient on giving us more time to do things. DOT has taken the position that they absolutely have to adhere to the deadlines of getting responses from community boards, which are 30 days or 40 days from when the DOT sends it to us, depending on whether it's a sidewalk cafe or outdoor dining. So that means in almost all cases, things are going to get approved only by DLP before we have to send our responses in and then go to the full board for ratification. But that's not something we have any flexibility about. It's just the way the program is being run now. But we do expect sometime soon, I think, a huge influx of these new applications, and they're very time consuming because the rules are new. Very few people understand them. I mean, we learn new things about them every time we look at them or get a new situation. We go to DOT with things and sometimes they don't know the answers. So if we don't know them, typically a lot of the applicants don't, many of them don't have representation. So they're muddling through. So there's a huge education process that's happening with that too. But that's basically, I think, the big change that you're going to be seeing coming from us, that there's going to be more and more of these outdoor dining things. But it's important, if board members not on BLP, either because of you or your block associations or buildings or whatever, if you should keep an eye on the BLP agenda and roadway dining, because if there are things that concern you, you really should try to let them be known to the BLP committee before the meeting. Because as I said, there's not going to be, we can discuss them at the full board, but there's not going to be that kind of flexibility to really change our position with DOT, because they may, well, in fact, have already acted on something based on the early deadlines they've given us.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You guys do a terrific job. I mean, it's just, and doing all that work. The DOT then sends it to you and you send it back to DOT.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it already approved when DOT sends it to you?
Now, all DOT does is sort of, we hopefully review it for compliance with the law. You know, are they trying to put a roadway cafe in a bus lane, which they can't do.
Okay.
So they do like a low level staff review, send it to us, and we have a statutory role built into the new regulations. They are required to send it to us. We are allowed to make recommendations. If we oppose a sidewalk cafe license, there actually has to be a hearing before the DOT at which we can be heard. And there actually, and this seems to be to me a bit of a waste of time, but for the roadway dining, there actually has to be a hearing with DOT on every roadway application, whether or not anyone opposes them. So in a sense, there's more mandated direct contact between the agency and us on this front than there is with the SLA, because we are not legally guaranteed a hearing the way we are in this case. But so the DOT gets an application, looks at it essentially for form, sends it to us. We send in our opinions. They then have a hearing and then take this set of information into account when making a decision about what to do.
Okay. My second question, Frank, the place opens on the sidewalk, they put up illegal signs, they play music, whatever. Does DOT have a list of things we should be looking out for?
You mean to go to the, well, in our stipulation form, we try to keep that up to date with the issues that are of concern and ask applicants to represent that they will, or, you know, more likely won't do things. Are you asking if there's something we could like send out to the
I was
public?
wondering if my block association, they come to us, it's very good, it's we review it, we send it to you.
Yeah.
You get along pretty well. Afterwards, they open up, there's they do all kinds of things that they shouldn't be doing.
Right.
Is there
We have maybe we have a policy, we have a nuisance reporting policy.
there we go.
Yeah, so that's on our website, we can
Yeah.
certainly send that around, which instructs folks in the public specifically, you have this issue. But it's not so much what to look for, but how to report it, so it's an escalating policy, so it says, you know, like step one, contact the owner, you've done that, you said, listen, your music is too loud, you're putting up illegal signs, you're lighting or something. They've done that, they're unresponsive, you call 311, you go into the community precinct meetings, you're escalating. Eventually, the top level of escalation, for at least for us, is coming back to us and saying, we've got this problem, we're gonna be handling something like that tomorrow, actually, with a hotel that is, you know, it's been years, but now they're basically turned their rooftop, what was supposed to be background music, into a club. And so now we're gonna be dealing with that, so, you know, we have that, so.
Okay, I think the problem with the list, JD, is every time we come up with like things that operators should do, bad operators find
You're very creative.
new ways to get around it.
Yeah.
So I think it's better if you know, you or your neighbors are being bothered by something, you reach out to, you know, Bert or me or Jesse or Nell or someone on the committee and say, you know, this is happening, can they be doing this?
Sure,
And, you know, there are people on various block associations.
But the
who
other,
deal with me directly on.
I mean, the
Yeah.
other thing you can do is just go to the stipulation, which is on the web, right, on our web.
right, I mean.
And it has the list of everything they should be doing.
Right, but I'm thinking, you shouldn't be doing that, because A-frame, signs.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
all of them.
Yeah, I think that would be hard to create like a one pager.
No, but we
It's
have,
just like-
this is in our, this is in the list.
That's right, that's right.
Use it outside,
This is in the list.
windows
That's on
open.
the list, okay.
Yeah,
It's-
but it's, as you see, it's tough to.
And you should do 311.
I have no complaints.
Well,
What did you just say? So I have two questions actually for you. First is tying into this Department of Transportation issue, because so many things come to us for ratification.
Yeah,
Has there been any effort to change the rules so that that timeline does shift? Are we able to write a letter to the state or whoever wrote those rules? Can we talk about maybe the 30 to 40 day window is not long enough, maybe make it 45 or something?
I mean,
Alter that?
we fought that very hard, when the rules were
and
being implemented, making the points you'd expect that. You know, given our meeting schedules, we need, I think we asked for 60 days. And lost that, my understanding from talking to people in the industry is that there's gonna be a lot of pressure to relook at the rules in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah.
Because now it's very
Yeah.
experience, but now it's very
And I
experience.
think at that point, we can ask to look at parts of the rules that are bothering us.
I can speak for the district managers of all the 12 community boards. We're all in the same situation, especially the ones down in the southern part of the district. 'Cause, you know, where all the small streets are and all the restaurants are, it's a madhouse.
Yeah.
And so, but what DOT has said specific face to our faces is basically, this is the way the law was written. And this is, if you wanna change it, go talk to your legislator.
Yeah.
And so I think that is good. I think we're growing to that position in which everybody on both sides of the fence sees problems and want to change it, because I don't think DOT is actually particularly happy with this whole program either.
Because we're experiencing what we said we would experience, and now we're experiencing it, so I said. So my second question is a different topic altogether, and it's related to cannabis. Is it one that we now have a working group or whatever, task force, whatever the title is of that, and at one, when this first started, we said maybe that gets married into DLP at some point. Has there been any strategic discussion about it? Because a lot of the issues that cannabis task force or consistency and regular BLP is not very good at that sort of thing. Has there been any discussion about it?
He's looking. And
I think-
I just told you, we
I think-
are overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think if you do that, you have to deem it a separate committee that could have the same membership as BLP, but seriously, I think it would have to be.
But has the volume of this stuff?
Yeah, I think it would have to be, you know, two separate meetings a month, which
Yeah.
sounds like a separate
Okay.
committee.
And I would just also more broadly, I think we're still. Maybe this DOT issue has some further room to evolve based on your suggestion of working with the electeds. Also, we were in a period of trying to assess like how full would the cannabis agenda also be, and we're still, I think, tracking and seeing, I mean, they didn't have a meeting, what was it, last month?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this considerable drop in dispensaries, but.
It's too soon to see the trend line, I
Too
think,
soon, okay,
but
that's-
like, it's a point that we shouldn't lose, but I think also, given how overwhelmed and the changes that they've had to.
But I think, as I said, I think
Exactly the
roadway
response I
dining,
thought I'd get.
I think outdoor dining at some point in the next 6 to 8 months will stabilize. In other words, we'll work through all the people who historically have wanted sidewalk cafes and roadway dining, and then it'll just be new applicants. And on the cannabis side, as I understood it, there were sort of windows where people could apply. And, you know, I think that's probably slowing down now until there's like the next gap for applications. But the other thing where it's really gonna overlap is when we start seeing more people who want on-premise consumption.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the issues start to get more similar, because it's not just looking at business, it's regulating how you deal with patrons of that business, which is something BLP does a lot of. So I think at minimum, there'll need to be some kind of coordination, but I agree, we probably need to wait a bit and see how the timeline for both of those areas sort of stabilizes.
Thank you.
We have one last question online and then we're gonna wrap it. Katie?
Yep. Hey, so Frank, I actually had two questions, but Paul already asked the first one. I was going to say, it sounds like we need to get our electeds involved. And frankly, one thought I had was about the district manager. I'm sorry, not Jesse, I don't mean you. Sorry, the borough president, because obviously this is taking away authority from our community boards, right? Like being able to do this thoroughly. So anyway, I just wondered if we reached out and gotten the Manhattan borough president or the other borough presidents involved.
Oh, the fact that the deadlines are essentially.
Oh, yeah, but we lost that. This,
Okay,
I mean,
all right.
the industry was obsessed with getting
Okay.
their way.
Hmm.
And so the timeline, they didn't want the community board to review, so they made the timeline very short.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, we actually got more, in a way, there's more meaningful review in that there actually is sort of a legal mechanism for us to give comments. And more importantly, there are these hearings, which, you know, we can participate in.
And Frank, that was my second question, was just whether or not, because of this new structure, you need more authority somehow from the community board in order to be able to basically be responding to these things or giving input at the hearings before it can be discussed at the community board. I just wondered if that would be helpful to you or not.
Wait, is from the community or from the board?
I mean,
the other people on the board?
I mean, typically, our committee chairs wouldn't be having lots of opinions without having it being discussed first at the community board, right? But now you have to. And I guess I was just wondering.
No.
Yeah, so I mean, as you've probably seen with liquor licenses historically, it's the rare one that rises to a level of major board discussion. So on the committee level, we still process them the same way. I mean, we have, you know, I think 12 people on the committee now, which is a sizable segment of the community board itself.
Okay.
One of the things we're very careful about is making sure the community as a whole gets notice. So we get a pretty good sense from who sends their views into the community board, whether this is a hot issue with the community or not.
Got it. So
But I
you're
think
saying
between-
even, okay.
I think between those two things, we have some sense of whether this is like a big deal thing, and if it is, we would try to escalate it in some way that it doesn't happen, that can't happen at a full meeting.
Yeah.
Got it.
I don't
Okay.
think we've really seen any of those yet.
Yeah, that currently the most we are doing is really technical. It's really saying, okay, does it comply with the rules? And what we find is very often, but it's not very often that we have had somebody say, we don't want this, because generally these are places where there was a cafe before. So the only issues that are coming up is people saying, hey, it has been, you know, it was really a badly operated cafe. But that has happened like 2-3 times, right?
Yeah, and DOT has made clear that they are bound strictly by what's in the rules and what isn't. So they, you know, Jesse was just at, you know, this borough board meeting where this was discussed. A lot of community boards sent comments about the DOT, but things we'd like to see, and the DOT's responses were essentially, you know, that's not in the rules, we can't do that, or it's in the rules this way. So we don't really have a lot of room for sort of macro level discussion on these issues. As Christine said, it's really just the technicality of trying to make sure the rules are implemented correctly and fairly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, everybody. We'll move on now to the chair report. I'll start by several, maybe it was in December, we talked about, maybe it was November, we talked about creating a board engagement working group. It was something that's come up both kind of grassroots and top down. So chairing that group will be Rodney and Rachel. We both know both Rachel, Rodney Washington, Rachel Lee. Specifically, the group will be focused on considering recommendations that will ultimately be brought back to exec, focused on increasing, again, offering recommendations to focus on increasing individual board members' understanding of board business. So really knowledge, transfer, information, et cetera. Mitigating the implications of term limits by creating more opportunities for board members. And 3, supporting social cohesion and a sense of belonging. Now, recognizing that some of that might be interesting to some folks and not interesting to others. I'm very hopeful that this working group, who Matt Green has agreed to join, Maria, Greg, Morris, Wendy Gonzalez, Ella Kim, and we have one invitation not yet responded to because someone's been traveling for a month, maybe. But we hope that this group will work together to again, discuss not just amongst themselves, but also do board, outreach to a broader group, whether that's, I don't know, through survey or focus groups, et cetera, to really get a sense of what are some tools and strategies that we could adopt as a board to help facilitate those three key areas. I've said this before, but we recognize that this is operating in a reality in which, as you've heard a lot, like a lot of our board members are already quite overtaxed, and we know that is especially true of our board staff. And so anything that this group ultimately, needs to be coming up with suggestions, keeping that in mind, that we have a very limited additional desire, and recognizing that the, again, expectations and desires of board members may not be the same as everybody who volunteered or was selected for this working group. And so this needs to be something that's kind of pressure tested with a broader group. But I believe they'll be meeting for the first time next month in February, sometime in February. Hopefully you all will respond favorably should they reach out to you, even if you don't want more board outreach or more engagement, that your feedback is valued and appreciated. I also just wanted to pick up on a theme. As I mentioned earlier, the Borough Board, which is a meeting convened by the Borough President's Office of Manhattan Borough Community Board Chairs, meets once a month on Thursdays. It's typically quite a long meeting, but things like the DOT, issue with restaurants has been coming up. The issue of cannabis and how do boards want to address this going forward, recognizing that we were kind of in a first phase of that process and maybe shifting to a new phase, as well as this conversation around hybrid meetings. Those are the kinds of things that don't just impact us uniquely. And I'm hoping actually that the Borough Board or the Borough President's Office can do more to help, represent our issues to the city agencies, because it's not just our board that has these issues. With, as Jesse said, the issues downtown as it relates to sidewalks and DOT are different than ours. But if ultimately DOT is saying whatever's in the rules, that's it, we may be more aligned with other boards than we think. And so just wanted to flag that that's something I try to represent and will continue to do so. And so, and also if you have ideas of things that might be relevant for other boards, certainly this issue of changes happening at the federal level and how our board's going to respond to that and what is the role of our boards in light of that, something I made a note that I'll make sure we bring up at the next Borough Board. I also just, there's a flyer for tomorrow's cruise terminal, what are they calling it?
Master plan.
Master plan, thank you. It's the second meeting of that is tomorrow evening at 6:30. I encourage all of you to go if you can. Is there remote participation? I think you have to be in person.
I think so.
But would encourage folks to go to that. Following the Western Rail Yards, the board vote in January to deny that ULURP. I just wanted to update folks that we did have a meeting last week with Eric Botcher. Paul, JD, Joe represented us in person. Unfortunately, I had to be remote, but it was I thought a good meeting, and recognizing that currently the proposal is with the borough president, who we're meeting with next week. Next week to express our concerns about the project, but we wanted to make sure we got to Eric quickly, recognizing that he is ultimately the vote for the ULURP, and he seemed to really understand our concerns and seemed prepared to indicate to the applicant, that there at least presently seems to be a lack of community support for the project. I don't know if there's anything you guys would care to add to that.
No, I think that's good representation, that Eric was warm to us. And less elusive than normal,
But still, so,
but he's gonna wait for it to come to city council, so the next step is borough president, then city planning.
So he
and
still
then
hasn't
him.
made his.
So he is not going to make a statement one way or the other until it gets to his decision point.
he's negotiating.
That's where he is. On that letter, do we want to talk about? some of
Yes,
it?
right.
Yeah, or do you want to
Sure.
finish that and do it under new business?
Let me just quickly go through
Yeah,
what's
okay.
left and then we can come back to that if you like. But that's a good reminder, I'll speed up. I just want to know Bayview, former women's prison, ESD has reached out to us. That project, they've already announced, that they had selected a contractor for that project. But they are now working on getting the approvals for the GPP, and then ESD will be the lead agency in that. And so we can expect that Bayview will be coming back to us for a presentation at committee in March. So more to come on that. But they're going to they're asking for approval for ESD to be the lead agency. There will be a public hearing to confirm that or to reflect on that. And then they will come to us to discuss the pieces of the proposal and the plan going forward. Colored School number 4, a project that many of us have been following. We received a belated response, but a thorough response, or somewhat thorough response from, I think it's the interim captain or something of DSNY. Indicating the plan, responding to the questions that we had outlined in a previously sent letter. That letter is now in the Blue Dropbox. We can also make it available to anyone who wants to see it. In the letter, they indicated that the building continues to suffer from disrepair. The roof was not adequately addressed. That they intend to start repairs, renovation September 2025, which all things considered is pretty soon, not for those who were concerned that there was serious neglect happening and it's winter, so it's not great. But at least there is a start date. They anticipate the project will take 2 years. And something that I found was, I believe, new in that letter was that DSNY intends to continue to hold the property. So, but they have agreed to come to the next meeting. In their letter stated that they would plan to attend the next Blue meeting. So they will be there at the February meeting. And we have also alerted Eric Washington, who many of you know has been very vocal and a real driver on this. So, so that's that. ESD also reached out to us about having additional conversations on the Intrepid parking lot site. I was sort of referred to earlier about, you know, looking at housing more holistically, recognizing that we have a number of properties sort of coming up for interest. I think we do feel quite pleased with our working relationship with ESD, starting with Bayview and then going to Site K, thank you. But now with the Intrepid and all of the other developments in the area, it's really important that we be in dialogue with them to be clear on, and with ourselves, to be clear on what we want to see for that site. Lastly, NYCHA, we had, I think, for those, again, I'd really encourage you to go back to the committee discussions. If you were unable to attend the CLUE meeting, I would watch it online for the most up-to-date, thorough review. But we did meet with our electeds. Our electeds affirmed their position as being in favor of the current proposal. We discussed and that is pretty much their starting, middle, and end position. And also they acknowledge that there are areas in which the project could be improved, and they expressed a willingness to work with people who want to see that improvement happen. There's no clear framework for doing that, although the co-chairs and I met with Jesse again this morning, and we're talking through ways that we can continue to try to push for those changes that we want to see. Meanwhile, we also had a meeting with the Hudson Guild. We had a meeting with the Fulton Tenants Association leadership. And this morning we had a meeting with Elliot Chelsea. You know, there's new leadership there. That one, Renee, who many of you have seen at our, I'm sure all of you have seen at our meetings, and who at the last meeting, I think there may have been a discussion, but that vote was authorized or approved by NYCHA, and she is the, I think she's waiting for like official documentation, but she is seen as the head of the Tenants Association, and she's pulled together a board. So we met with her this morning. Just briefly, you can imagine for her, this is a brand new role, like any new role that you take on, especially in the middle of such a big project, or, you know, dealing with such a big project. She has a lot she has to really get her hands around, and she expressed to us that her focus is really meeting with tenants. So our conversations in nature were a little bit different. You just because the folks at Fulton feel that they have a much better handle on what issues are happening in the building, what is most troublesome outside of the proposed development, just like what are the issues people are dealing with day to day in their top 1, 2, 3. Renee reasonably said, you know, she'd have to get back to us on that because she herself is just assessing that. Candace, she mentioned that you did a walkthrough with her and she was appreciative of that. And I think, you know, her closing comments in our meeting was like, we're not gonna do this alone. Unclear if she meant just us as a board, but nonetheless, she knows that there's like a real community effort here. So, and we expect that this will also be on the CLUE agenda for February. And for anyone who's interested, we were able to get a copy of the master development agreement. I literally carry mine everywhere. So if you are interested, the first 15 pages are a breeze to read, and you know, everybody should, as just being a good board member. If you have the time to dig into the rest of it, I think, you know, this is a very complex, nuanced project. Is it online? It is online. It's on our website. And I think the more people can really be rooted in the facts as they are, and has been agreed to by NYCHA and the developer or the applicant, the better off our board will be in engaging in these discussions. So I know it's a lot, but I really would encourage folks to dive in and or attend or watch the next CLUE meeting where this will be addressed. That's it for me.
You want to do the rest of the
So we can come back to Western Maryland and then we'll hopefully briefly, and then we'll go to district manager report.
I mean, I think this, well, it comes out of a combination of things. The meeting we had with Eric, where we wanted to try to present to him a way that he can come forward with a positive response that moves us forward and not just say no and stop, because that's a hard position to take. And within our letter, we had a recommendation to consider adopting the marshalling yards, which is the block just north of the Western Mill Yards. So it'll be 4 city blocks, and to integrate that into a housing plan that presents 4 blocks of housing rather than 3 blocks of housing. But it also raised concerns that if it's all state properties, that a GPP could come in and override and have all just affordable housing at the marshalling yards with higher end market rate at Western Mill Yards, and have that segregation of housing, which we as a board often oppose. And to allow a GPP related to be able to say, oh, well, you're putting all the housing at the marshalling yard, so let's move forward with the commercial and the casino on the Western Mill Yards. So in our conversations with Eric, when we were talking about how do we get access to the billions of dollars that Hochul had committed to with the city of Yes, maybe some of those could go towards building the platform at Western Mill Yards. He was asking like a per unit housing cost, and that money, you know, if it costs $10 million to build one apartment, that's not feasible. So Christine has asked that we maybe talk about, let's us come up with a plan for those 4 blocks and say, let's propose something that is a plan that we can say, I mean, give to somebody else and say, I'm not going to support this current application because there is this great plan that we should instead adopt. So is that a good?
Yeah, it is.
Is that something that Clinton House, I mean, that feels like real committee work and real work, but like that.
And I mentioned that to Joe, and he was intrigued and interested. He thought we should discuss it. But I'm very concerned that, you know, Related is going to take that suggestion and turn it to their advantage. So I think I'm very interested into us like we did for the Port Authority, create a plan, and I think those 4 blocks, it's probably not very complex to create a plan. It doesn't have to be in the last detail, right? But create a plan where we say, okay, all those things are, and if you want a hotel, you put it in that place, and no, there is no casino, and blah, blah, blah. And now you have a plan, which is that we could send to the governor and say, look, or we could send to ESD and say, look, and this is our plan, you know. And I think he would have, and Eric could be the champion and say, this sounds like a good plan. So it's defensive and offensive at the same time.
I think it's a good idea.
And I think it doesn't probably, I mean, it's work, but it probably doesn't take so much because we know the WRI very well and the marshalling plan and, you know, these experts we have can pull, you know, a few meetings and roll things. What do you think?
I think it's an opportunity to give some community members something to do.
No, yeah.
Some Clinton House kitchen.
Yeah.
Well, and the housing.
Take this on, yeah, sure.
And the housing, right, yeah. And it's, I don't know that it is very complicated. It is really saying, this is the way we want to see it versus the massing that has been done by, you know, related, right? We could do a massing of, oh, this is the way we want it. It's not a lot of work, but at least we would have something on the table.
I love it keeps saying that.
No, because when I think about what we have done when we did you know, the Port Authority plan, this was like a massive amount of work, massive. But I think doing a massing plan for that,
You're comparing it.
right? I'm saying this is way less work. And it would put us in a position when we talk to city planning to say, there is an alternate plan, by the way, which generates X, Y, Z, which is always a better position than saying no.
I think if there's an interest, I mean, I think it belongs to land use, it's, I mean,
Right.
with feedback from housing, of course, but it belongs to land use. I would also just remind us that like the number of city and state agencies, like NMTA, that have to be involved in ultimately adopting such a plan.
Oh.
It's quite complex.
Right.
And so also figuring out who, it's not just, it's yes, selling it to Eric, so he feels better with an alternative perhaps, and I think that's valuable. But at the state level, again, MTA being so complex.
Yeah.
It's gonna have to have a lot of, any alternative would have to have a lot of champions, which.
I think MTA, as long as they get their money, you know, right? This is they have a lease and they have I mean, we have the numbers from from the White proposal. So that's my recommendation. I would hate to see this very, very good idea of adding the, you know, the marshalling yard coming back to us with, okay, we do it on one place and we put the casino on the other one, which is, I'm sure Relators is going to do. Relators is going to say, oh, good, you know?
I guess I would just say, and this came up earlier today, conversations related to night shift. I'll conclude again. I think just, it sounds like valuable to dig into this conversation. I guess I just am curious, still as a relatively new community board member, like how much time folks have to focus on this complicated endeavor, but maybe more than anything else, like what's the intent exactly? You know, is the goal here to give Eric something he can use to put on the table? Is it to try to influence something else? It's important to me, just from where I sit, because we're navigating this, I think, with night shift. It's like, we put in the work and we're invested, like, what's the leverage exactly you're trying to use? And that's not to say that I believe that the community board can't influence anything in every way. This community board in particular, I'm grateful to be part of because of its impact and its history. But like, just to your point, like, there's a lot of entities with their hands in this conversation. What is, like, why are we, to what end, for what value, is always something I just gonna kind of reflect on.
So, I mean, I, when I was processing this myself, sort of similarly, why go through all this? What's the purpose? Right? It gets exhausting. But there are a couple of things this board has always fought for is, affordable housing and making sure that we have strong affordable housing. This board is, one of the only ones with a housing plan. We are the only ones that tackled the 12 FAR issue. So as a board to continue to push for a plan for housing, then this parcel, one of the tones of our letters from Western Rail Yards was, this is an opportunity for us to really do something great, and this is a missed opportunity. And in our conversation with Eric, he was like, okay, I can maybe pick that up. But you guys, I can't do that for you, you have to do that, right? So I think that the point is to address the concerns that this board constantly fights for, which is housing, affordable housing, smart planning, and being able to get our elected officials some sort of cover to deny something that we know is an unmitigated disaster. And I love that chunk.
I like that. It's button on the end there.
It's from, yes. So I think, does that answer?
That's all.
Yeah.
Well, I would answer it a little differently. I think it is a tremendous amount of work that's been planned, and it's also a tremendous amount of time because we have to go to public review, we have to discuss it, come back here, we can go back there, so there is a lot of work involved. And we don't have the support of our council member or electeds that we used to have in the past. When we saw Eric, we did not jump in, oh, here's a great opportunity. We did not. Why not? Why didn't we? I think we have more support in the past than we do right now. So we can push and push and push, but if we had something coming back, I think it'd be easier to do all the work. But I didn't get that feeling from Eric. The letter said, here's a great way to go. Why didn't we jump at that?
I think that our past experience, our recent past experience had us concerned that if we were not clear on not the opportunity, but what, that he being focused on conveying why this was not the right proposal. I think I was just personally, obviously speaking very candidly, I was concerned that if we shifted too much to what the opportunity was, then we were gonna lose, then that could become the negotiating piece.
Right.
And so I think that was a tactic. I think that I felt that was the right tactic going into that meeting because we have not been aligned on his support on some other recent issues. And as we said, NYCHA. And so I felt like this was something we had to do, but I don't think that means that we can't also come back to him and try to get his support on something that can potentially work. But I hear you, it would have been refreshing and nice for him to do that,
Yeah.
but I don't think that's how we presented it to him. I think we presented, these are the problems with this site and why we want you to feel comfortable holding up, our position as you go forward. And knowing that he's gonna then have to, at some point, reflect that to the applicant, who's gonna have a lot of persuasive arguments. And so if it got too muddy, would that get lost in that process? I don't know if that's that helpful to say all that here, but.
This was also public, because there's a lot written about CB4's response to this project. And it wasn't necessarily like, hey, good for CB4 for standing up. It was the tone was sort of like, from these cranes and other places, you're getting in the way.
Yeah, of course.
And so counteracting with the strategy to say we're in favor of affordable housing, and stuff, get that, that's great. You're up against a massive entity to try to champion that strategy. So we'll make sure we're going in the same direction as we try to communicate.
So we'll ask your committee to think about that. And we can work
Should you
together.
throw that letter?
You just noodle over that.
Okay, are you okay with that? Okay, great. With that, we're gonna move to the district manager's report.
Alrighty, everybody, so you have the full board agenda, the draft full board agenda, and the draft committee schedules. Copies are here on the table somewhere in your Dropbox. Please take a look, make sure we got everything right. Please take a look at the committee schedules. They are just a snapshot. They will be changing, but do take a look at your committee, do look at others, so you're aware of what's happening. In terms of February's committee meetings, The only committee that is meeting out of its normal schedule is flu, which is gonna meet on Tuesday instead of Monday due to the holiday. That's, I believe, sorry, give me a second. The 18th, it's gonna be on the 18th instead of the 17th. And then
Tuesday, the 8th. Oh, I mean, sorry, my fault, my bad.
all right, anybody else? Okay. And then the only other thing I wanted to, run by you all, and it's sort of perfunctory, but if someone really wants to discuss it more, I'm happy to do it. So in the city charter, unbeknownst to me and many people, there's a requirement that the community boards produce an annual report every year. That is separate from the statement of district needs. And I called my predecessor, right, exactly, and I said, did you used to do this? And he goes, oh, yeah, I used to do this. Yeah, I can tell you, because I just found this out. And so I looked it up, and yeah, we used to do this. It's called the annual report. The last one was 2012. Don't feel like you're out of place. We're out of place. No one else has noticed it either. Especially since we're supposed to be sending this to the mayor's office, and I've not been contacted about anything. If I throw out a keyboard, I get called. So anyway, it looked like it was pretty done administratively every year. And the only reason I raise this with you, because we're gonna start, if we start following the city charter and I start needing to produce this report, I just wanna make sure you guys are all comfortable with me coming up with the report or whatever. So the last report basically was, it's an introductory overview, basically kind of a summary of what my district service cabinet meetings are, which is the monthly meeting I hold with the city agencies, which you can find online on our website to get a good understanding of what those are. It does ask for accomplishments and goals. Again, how in depth we want to go on to that. Again, that could be something that I work on with the chair with, or maybe I can come here and produce a draft and you can see it and stay comfortable with these are accomplishments and goals. It's a copy of their statement of district needs. They do, again, this is what was in the old report. So this is, I'm not saying everything was gonna be in the new report, but there's a discussion about what I guess, land use, housing and landmarks, which I think would simply just be the chunks of the statement of district needs, but, and something about, street permit applications, which we really don't manage in the same way anymore. Newsstand applications, which we haven't touched in decades. And then a copy of every full board agenda. So it equals out to be 48 pages. There's no prerequisite, there's no one asks. This doesn't seem to be it's our report, we decide on it. I guess I just want to make sure you're all comfortable with what if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna produce this, it'll be something of that nature. It'll have those summaries.
Can't you just send this one, Jesse, since they didn't look at it from.
I could very well, that's what I also write, I don't want us to think that what we write on this is going to be commented on, everybody's responding to, because they haven't noticed we haven't sent it since 2012. So I just wanted to run it all by you and see if you're comfortable with it. Christine, you wanna take over and write the whole thing? No.
Good job, Christian.
Yeah.
On the website, we have that section, goals and accomplishments.
Oh, yeah, well,
So-
that might not be as old as 2012, but it is.
It is old.
Yeah,
So
it is
what I'm
very old.
suggesting is that everybody writing like 3 lines.
Well, that's
Could be something that goes on the website.
That's what I'm saying, I will, we're just gonna discuss this, and figure out how we wanna do it, but I just wanted to not have it where you guys are like, wait a second, what is this annual report? Why was I never consulted?
I move that Jesse does it.
I second that motion.
Thank you, that's what I was looking for, that's it, my report is done.
Yeah, Jesse.
Jesse Greenwald?
Okay, well, thanks, everyone. That concludes our meeting. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Second, thank you all for your patience and for the dedication.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody online.
It's like my existence right now, that